everybody. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about relationships and how geek on geek relationships are portrayed in the media. So I'm going to start this out by saying that there really aren't that many good portrayals of two geeks, two nerds, whatever, being in a relationship, whether it be in television shows or movies. It is super rare to see two people who share similar hobbies and interests uh, together, which should strike you as strange. And obviously, when we're talking about television shows and movies and any type of media like that, they really want to go for the drama factor, I guess. And that is something that you're going to get from putting two people together who aren't well paired. Because nobody wants to watch a show about two people who get along and communicate and respect each other, which is kind of unfortunate. Um, so, when it comes to the media portrayal of nerdy guys, usually what you're going to see is you get the trope of the kind of undesirable nerd guy who gets paired up magically with a quote unquote normal hot girl. And that's obviously not to say that there aren't hot nerd girls, because there definitely are, despite what some people might think. Uh, but for this trope, you need to have a kind of awkward, overly invested in his hobbies nerdy guy being paired up with a girl who kind of wants nothing to do with those hobbies. The best representation of this is obviously on Big Bang Theory, which is one of the reasons that I really dislike that show. Um, in this portrayal, what you get is that you have the guy who is super over invested in his hobbies to the point of often ignoring his partner. Um, Now, what this causes is a lot of resentment, which is great for comedy or drama, whichever way you want to take it. And you end up with the girl just not respecting the guy's interests at all. And I can kind of understand, out in the world, why a lot of male nerds get really frustrated with this idea, because you do see it a lot. You see the idea of, you know, you're never going to have a girl who's going to respect your hobbies or be remotely interested in your hobbies, so why even try? And, it's not only misleading, but it's really damaging to people being able to find partners who would be interested in what they're interested in. Um, Calling something a hobby in itself is misleading, because you can't really call it a hobby when it's a really integral part of yourself. A hobby for me would be something like knitting. It's something I can pick up and put down. It's something I haven't done in a year, but I enjoy doing it once in a while. To me, a hobby wouldn't be if you're an avid comic collector, or if you play D&D once a week with your friends. Like, that's not a hobby, that is part of who you are. So treating it like something that can be picked up and put down is not only super disrespectful, but it also leads people who don't have those interests to kind of think less of them. Because for some people, the idea of occasionally playing video games with friends at a party is cool, but it's not something that means anything to them. But for other people, being able to come home from their job and play video games, for maybe a couple hours every day, like that is who they are. And that is a perfectly acceptable way to be. So, the problem with the nerd guy versus the normal hot girl trope is, like I said, a lack of respect. Um, the lack of respect for the hobbies, which ultimately is a lack of respect for the person as a whole. Because again, when you are what you do and you are your hobbies, if someone doesn't respect your hobbies, then they are not respecting you. There usually is also a huge problem where normal people are portrayed as only being interested in things like dancing and drinking and going out all the time, having parties, and nerds are shown as not doing that at all, which is incredibly false because, most nerdy people out there are well aware that nerds love to party. So, what this kind of leads into is there's a weird dichotomy that gets thrown up again for comedic effect, which is pitting the hobby versus sex. And within a relationship, obviously, there's nothing wrong with not being interested in sex, not having sex often. But what it kind of comes down to for this trope is that it's emasculating the nerd guy to insinuate that he's more interested in doing something like playing video games or reading comics or, trolling online message boards than he is in being intimate with his partner. Again, this is something that's kind of um, a tricky thing to talk about because you're going to have people who are not that interested in sex. But again, this media is kind of being pumped out for mass market consumption, which means that the audience is expecting characters who are, not asexual. So that's kind of not even an option. So if we're talking about characters who do have normal sex drive, then it's kind of this absurdist idea to say that, oh, well, he would rather play video games even though that his, girlfriend is standing there in lingerie. Not, besides hobby versus sex, as I have it written down on my paper here, you also have hobby leading to embarrassment. So for the normal girl in this trope, she's probably going to be super embarrassed by whatever it is that her geek guy boyfriend is into. Um, Obviously, something like video games isn't really, it's so mainstream now, and even comics to a certain extent are mainstream. So it's hard to show someone being embarrassed about those types of things. But at the same time, shows like Big Bang Theory kind of ignore that certain things have become so widespread and they still treat them with this weird stigma. And obviously, there are going to be people out there who are still going to be weirded out if anybody reads comics at all or plays video games at all, let alone doing something like D&D. Usually tabletop role-playing and LARPing are the two things that are niche enough interests that they will be understood to, make somebody be a super awkward person, basically. Which, again, I've been role playing for years upon years, and there are plenty of really awkward people who role play. I mean, I'm pretty awkward, but at the same time, it's a social game. So it's the idea of, D&D players being awkward and antisocial is just kind of counterintuitive because you have to cooperate and sit around a table with a bunch of other people. But anyway, so within the trope, the embarrassment that the normal partner feels is supposed to be something that the audience is going to empathize with because no, you don't want to have a partner who's going to make you embarrassed because they're going out and going to a comic convention. And again, this is something that can occur within actual real relationships. But I will tell you right now that if you are with someone who is embarrassed by the things that make you happy, you need to not be in that relationship. And that's going to lead me in a moment to what makes a good relationship.